All right, I got it 5:30. So I think Josh said that he might be a little bit late. He's running in from picked up his kids. So George, you want to start this meeting off?
Sure, Mayor, I appreciate everybody being here for a special meeting. We've got really 3 items to consider tonight. The first is a work session item to review the proposed budget for next fiscal year. We've already had some briefing on that on July the 14th. This is going to update a lot of that information, and then the other 2 items that are on the agenda for action are, one, to approve a resolution to place an item regarding the tax rate on the agenda for the council's meeting on September the 15th, and another to call a public hearing on the tax rate on September the 8th. And then a resolution that would modify the resolution calling the general election because of some time frame, early voting times that have changed pursuant to the governor's order. So Mayor, the first item is the work session to talk about the budget. We've got a presentation of a number of slides similar to what we've done in the past, and then some additional information that we might want to share with the council as well. And we're ready to start that. My intent is to ask Lakita if she would go through a slide presentation. You have been provided, although without a lot of time to review it, a hard copy of the proposed budget and yesterday, and we updated a few pages of that today that had some just minor corrections in them. But Lakita's going to go through the budget, and then we're going to be able to attempt to answer any questions that you have and kind of get some direction from council on where you want to go. Included in Lakita's presentation will be a calendar of next steps so that we'll know when to anticipate that the budget would be adopted. And then we'll go from there at the direction of the council. So Mayor, with that, I'd like to ask Lakita to start the presentation unless you have any speakers that you'd like to address with their comments before we start.
Yeah, first off, let's keep in mind, this is only an introduction to the budget. No one expects you to have this all set down and ready to go. This is just an introductory meeting. We can have as many meetings as we want. Now with Zoom, you can also set up a meeting with George and Lakita individually for questions, and we can have as many group meetings as you want to have. This is just an introduction to the budget. You're not supposed to be making major decisions on it just yet, but we want to give a good overview of what we're going for here, or what we're looking at anyway. So that's why we're here today. It's not to make major decisions, it's to get familiar where we're at and where we need to go. Because no one has expected you to have read the budget last night. At least I hope not. Now, Leslie, has anybody signed up to speak or at the beginning of?
John asked a question about being able to speak, but he didn't mention which item he was interested in.
Who's John?
John Havali.
What?
Mayor, I think it was John Havali who was here on the meeting earlier.
Okay.
I want to speak, but
John, you'll have to unmute yourself, and we'll give you 3 minutes and fire away. The unmuting part's the hard part. John? John? Well, John's figuring that out. Is there anybody else, Leslie?
No one else has said anything.
Okay. John, you've got to hit the unmute button.
Mayor, just as a matter of procedure, is it your intent to have anybody who wants to speak at the beginning of the item that's coming up?
At the beginning, because we're going to be going through as an overall.
And then once the council's discussion starts, that would, okay.
That'll be it, because we'll have plenty of opportunities for people to speak once we get through this introductory overview of the budget. John? Okay, well, we seem to have lost John. So we are going to start. Lakita, the show is yours.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So Leslie's going to bring up the PowerPoint in just a second. While she's getting that together, George mentioned pages 11, 12, and 13. I emailed those to you this afternoon. The far right column that had those percentage changes, I had to update that. So I just want to point you to your email, or if you have any additional questions about that. All of the numbers there were correct. It was just the percentage change in that far right column. So the only other thing I want to call your attention to before we get started is within the management letter, you will see that we listed the total number of new program requests, and that number also needs to be updated to 862,195. We failed to include some of the streets requests in there. So in totality, even though none of those are being included or funded with this budget that we're talking about tonight, I just wanted to make that, that update for you tonight, and we will get that corrected in the management letter before we actually post the budget. So without any further ado, we will go ahead and get started. The agenda for today. So we're gonna, take a look at the budget process in itself, review several of the city's funds. We're gonna look at fiscal year 2021 assumptions and highlight, what things kind of stick out this year, what things were different. And then we're going to look at the new program requests that were submitted by the various departments. And we're going to talk about the tax rate and talk about next steps in the budget adoption process. So just to look here at some of the milestones that we've already passed with this budget adoption. Earlier in June, we started asking the departments for, what they thought they wanted included for fiscal year 21. Mostly June and July, we've spent meeting with the departments, going through those requests, discussing them, looking at what we actually wanted to include, to propose. Again, we didn't end up actually proposing anything. We'll talk about the reasons why we didn't, but we've included a list of those proposals in your budget books as well as in this presentation. And we went through the normal process. We received our initial estimates from staff. Staff had various meetings with the city managers and finance. On July 25th, we received the taxable valuation from Tarrant Appraisal District. We went through completing the calculation, the tax rate calculation, working with the comptroller's office as well as the tax office and the appraisal district. And then this evening, of course, is our first overview and presentation of the budget.
Well, that was brief. We're not done, right?
Am I back?
Yeah, you've been here.
You're here. The slide hasn't changed. I don't know whether
I think
Leslie's with us or not.
Okay.
Leslie froze for a moment, so I think she's gonna have to come back in a second.
Okay.
So Lakita, when we talk about these new programs, right, I just want to make sure it's clear, because I see this out on social media, that somehow the city manager asked for an assistant city manager. If I'm not correct, and if anybody on the council reminds me, wasn't that a council idea last year that we thought about maybe adding assistant city manager, and we found out this year we just don't have the money and we're not going to do it? Wasn't that something we discussed? Not necessarily George discussed. Can somebody help me out with that? Verbally?
Yes.
Yeah, Brian, you're correct. The
Okay.
council discussed it, not
Okay.
George.
And the justification behind it was a way to bring somebody in as a transitional unit that when George decides to retire, we have the person that takes his place.
Okay, I just want to make sure because it's been out that George is pushing this, and I think it was we did actually. Okay, so Leslie's back. Hi, Leslie. Nice to see you back.
Sorry.
Next slide.
Next slide. I couldn't figure out if I froze or if Leslie froze, but we'll get it figured out. Okay, next slide is just about the fund structure itself. So as you're aware, we have a variety of special revenue funds. We have the general fund. We have our proprietary funds, which are the water and the stormwater funds. We have debt service. We'll take a quick look at that and also talk a little bit about capital projects as well. Okay, so let's start by kind of looking at how we intend to end the year for fiscal year 1920. So we know that when we completed the budget, we started with a budgeted drawdown of $862,000, okay? But we've talked about this several times during the course of the year. We have been able to reduce that drawdown sum to an estimated $657,336. So essentially, we've looked at saving around $200,000 throughout the course of the year. So projected reserves at the end of the year are looking at about $940,257. Okay, that's 12.5% of budgeted annual expenditures. And we know that our policy requires us to have 15%. And so we're doing everything that we can to try to work towards still meeting that, but we budgeted 7.9%. So we're coming out at 12.5, even though we budgeted at 7.9. So that's some improvement. And you know, what is that improvement attributed to? Well, you know, we had salary savings. You know, we did somewhat of a hiring freeze at some point this year because after we were reviewed by the rating agency, it was suggested that we do that. So as a result of doing that, we froze some of the police and fire positions for a little bit. We had a vacancy in the library that we didn't fill for quite some time. And, you know, in addition to that, we cut back on travel and training. And so we did all of those things in an effort to kind of save general fund balance. So for the street fund for this current fiscal year, we are projected to be at $341,246. Okay, that's 32.5% of budgeted expenditures. The only thing that we kind of wanted to call attention to for the street fund is that we know that the street fund is funded essentially with franchise fee revenue. Okay, with Senate Bill 2, franchise fee revenue is going to be reduced. So you'll see a reduction in some of the franchise fee that the city received for next year. We wanted to be conservative, but you know, realistic about the franchise fee money that we will get moving forward. Another thing that you'll notice about the street fund is that historically our expenditures outweigh our revenue. Well, that's never a good situation. One of the reasons is because we pay some salaries out of streets that we probably in the future need to kind of start thinking about budgeting those salaries out of the general fund. Because normally at cities, that's how I've seen it done. Actually, this is the first time that I've ever seen any personnel costs coming out of the street fund itself. Normally, the street fund is situated within the general fund. But if that's something that the council adopted years ago for, you know, if there was a reason for that, we certainly can keep it separate. But the suggestion would be probably in the future to at least, if we don't move operating expenses to the general fund, we'll probably want to move personnel to the general fund, because that's the reason that we're outweighing our revenue is because of the personnel that's coming out of the street fund.
Lakita, can you define what a franchise fee is for those people who are out listening that don't know what that is?
Well, those are just the fees that are paid to the city for the use of facilities. And so in your budget book on, I don't know the page number, but after the streets tab, you'll see that we get various different franchise fees for the use of our facilities: telephone, garbage, gas franchise fees, electricity, the use of our right-of-ways, and things like that. So we historically, you know, we've remained steady kind of with the revenue that we're receiving, but Senate Bill 2 has enacted limits on the amount of revenues that cities are able to receive. So as a result, that has kind of been somewhat reduced going into next year. And I mention that because I want to make sure that we're paying attention to the fund balance in the street fund. With us continuously drawing it down, the end of next year, we're looking at $203,000 in that fund itself, whereas regular expenditures are far outweighing. So just something to kind of to keep on the lookout for.
I think George might chip in here as well, is that this has been a goal of the utility companies for some time, is to reduce or almost eliminate these franchise fees. So we can expect that to happen maybe again.
Yes, absolutely. We can't hear you, George.
Technology, it's wonderful. Can you hear me now? Historically, Mayor, and you know that franchise fees were essentially paid by utility companies because nearly all of their facilities were placed within cities' rights of way. The city acquired property to build roads and streets and enough right of way to put electric lines and water lines and sewer lines and gas lines and everything else in the right of way. Some of that franchise fee revenue has been eroded by the legislature, particularly by telecom companies, where they have had cities restricted on franchise fees that we could collect because some of it was they were being allowed to put facilities on electric poles and so forth. The bottom line is cities have taken on more and more responsibility of funding that access for private companies by being told we have to allow use of our rights of way by those public utilities. And sometimes the revenue we get from them has been diminished. Clearly, the privately owned utility companies would like to eliminate as many of those franchise fee requirements as is possible. And the new technologies has complicated that issue considerably. And the last session of the legislature wasn't any exception. As Lakita mentioned, we've been limited even more in what we can collect for allowing utilities to use publicly owned rights of way that, in my opinion, cities have paid for and should be able to get some return on to help compensate for that use.
Absolutely. And then, you know, because if you look at your budget book and look at the street improvement fund summary, you'll notice that all of the line items for franchise fees, we reduce by some percentage to anticipate that decrease next year. The only thing that you'll see pretty much as far as revenue that's increased within that fund is the transfer from the water fund. And that's just something that the city is able to do it at its discretion. We're using a 7% of water revenue. We're anticipating transferring that over to streets for next year. And that didn't begin this year, that began some time ago. So we're just continuing that on over into this year. The only reason the number is bigger is because we anticipate more water revenue next year. Okay, so that brings us to the water and sewer fund. So for this year, current year, we are projecting to end the year with $395,000 of working capital. That puts us at 44% of budgeted expenditures for this year. Now we know that We have some things ongoing with the city of Arlington with the transfer of some of the more operations transfers and also utility billing. We have, the water line installations in process. So we still have a lot of projects that we have outstanding in the water fund. And I'll talk a little bit more about what's expected next year in a later slide. But I'm sorry, Leslie, go back. The only thing I want to mention here in relation to this year also is that just a reminder as to what happened when we thought that we would be decreasing utility billing and operations expenditures this year, and they ended up increasing. Well, we had the contract with Fathom. We terminated that. That was an expense that we didn't budget for. And in addition to that, all of the ramifications that came with acquiring a new billing vendor whenever Fathom departed. So we had some unexpected expenses this year, but you'll notice in your budget that next year, operations and utility service will go down again. So we're hoping that this year is the year that we're hit with the one-time expenses, a lot of the one-time expenses, and then moving into next year, we'll start to see the expenditures in those two departments come down gradually.
Makita, if I could, just let me chime in there again and emphasize, there have been some unexpected expenses involved in getting everything done with the city of Arlington. We had hoped to have all of those, that transition done by this time. And it isn't ready yet, although we're meeting, I guess, this week with City of Arlington to try to tie down some loose ends on the meter reading, the meter equipment. But we have had some unexpected costs with the transition because of what we were forced into with Fathom going out of business. And there have been some unexpected challenges with getting the transfers done. So we're trying to be very cautious about any reserves that we have in the water and sewer fund until hopefully within the next few months, we'll have all of the customer billing transferred over, all of the meters being read properly, and all of the equipment that needs to be updated and replaced in the ground so that we can finalize everything with Arlington and know where we stand with all of our one-time costs. We hope that that's going to occur within the next 3 or 4 months, if not sooner than that. And we'll have a better picture of it, I think, by the end of this week on what the schedule is with the city of Arlington. So.
Hey, George, have we received any info on what the meter transition is going to cost related to what we initially anticipated it costing? Are we going to be within that number, or is it still unknown?
Well, I don't know that the answer is I don't think we know the final answer yet. The information we got from Arlington this week and that we're going to talk about later in this week has to do with that equipment and that infrastructure that needed to be placed on the meters and some particular problems that we've encountered with the Neptune meters that are in the ground. And the fact that some of those may just need to be replaced because they're not able to be read. And as I've said to you before, we have found problems with the meter reading that I think was to the city's detriment that may have been going on for a number of years as we've found all the meters, found some that were not operating. Those are all the things we're hoping in the end here are going to be operating correctly so that we're getting all of the revenue that we should be based on the rates that we're charging. But we keep running into surprises, and I don't think we've gotten a final cost for all of the things that they run into trying to replace that equipment.
Well, we had the bulk of the built-in capital expenditure money for the first year was not spent. Isn't that correct? That the most of that was not used and will go towards paying some of these one-time costs this year?
Yeah, I think the good news is that we built into the contract with Arlington a certain amount of capital expense in both year 1 and year 2. And then it provides for a certain amount of capital investment on our part in each of the years following that. And you're right, we didn't make the connection in year one, and we're applying the year one and year two cost to the connections we're making to actually take water. And there are other capital costs, but most of that has been accommodated in the contract documents and was anticipated back in April of last year.
Okay. Thank you, George.
Thank you, George. This is a slide that we included with the budget presentation last year. And I wanted to include it because, you know, as we all know, last year we budgeted for a pretty deep drawdown in the general fund balance. And as a result of that, some of the new ongoing costs is going to carry over into future years. And so when we looked at the budget last year, we knew that we would have 1 year where we would experience quite a bit of a drawdown, which would have been year one, which was this year. And then for year two, we knew that it was going to take us a while to recover from that. And so this slide, I just wanted to put out as a reminder to council of the situation that we found ourselves in with budgeting last year, and some of the assumptions that we made surrounding this particular slide. We looked at, first of all, a 3% sales tax increase, because if you see that line, that second line that goes into fiscal year 2021, boy, we were looking at a 2% fund balance, which was not a good situation. But even with that, that included a 3% sales tax increase, okay? Whereas this budget includes a 5% sales tax anticipated increase. Now, what this budget does not include is 8% increase in assessed valuation. Well, we knew at some point assessed valuation was going to fall off some, okay? Because we've enjoyed a good 5 or 6 years of seeing, you know, 6 to 7 to 8% increases in AV. And, you know, that's not going to happen all the time. And so this year is 1 year that we are seeing a decrease, which did hurt us some. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. And then the other assumption that we made was a 1% annual expenditure increase. Again, we did not include any new programs within supporting this budget, or any salary adjustments for staff, nor any step increases for police or fire. So just keep that in mind as we kind of go forward with the presentation, and in a later slide show you what some of the fund balance outcomes is going to be as a result of the deep drawdown this year.
Lakita, let me just clarify to make sure.
Okay.
On the 8% where we were assuming last year an 8% annual assessed value increase, and that when Lakita said this year that's been negative, I mean, what she meant was the growth has not achieved that. We are still seeing in this budget some growth in AV value, but it's very little. It's still positive. It's like 2.3% or 2.7%.
Yeah.
But it's not the 7 and 8% that we were projecting when we did the 5-year projections last year. Sorry, Lakita, I just want to make sure we're recognizing that the AV growth has grown, but just nearly what we had hoped for a lot of reasons.
Yes, absolutely. And that's worth mentioning. So yeah, we did enjoy it, you know, 6, 7, 8% increases for a few years. But yeah, this year's increase was only about 2.7%. So that's going to affect things, you know, moving forward. So let's move forward now. We've talked about what happened for 1920, what we think is going to happen. So let's move forward for fiscal year 2021. Look at some of the assumptions and highlights that were used in the development of this budget. Of course, we looked at past year trends, We plan to have existing services that we have to remain. It's funded in the budget that you have. Listening to the needs of our citizens, of course, council. We talked about, further reducing expenditures wherever we can. We're going to need to do that for the next, few years moving forward, to be honest, in order to get in a more positive situation with our fund balance. Working together with the departments, prioritizing personnel needs, and of course, finding solutions to decrease fund balance drawdowns. So the general fund, as we mentioned, this year we only experienced a 2.7% increase in property valuations. So that put us up to about 802 million in our property valuations, and you'll see how that played out with revenue projections in your general fund revenue summary sheet. But 2.7% increase there. Okay, a 4-cent proposed property tax increase. So what's proposed in this budget is to take the property tax rate, the total property tax rate, from 73 cents to 77 cents. We'll talk more about that in just a minute. This budget includes a 6% increase in healthcare costs that we anticipate the city to have to fund. There are no compensation increases or step plans in this budget. No program requests. We're drawing down the fund balance. Looks like at this point, $452,340. However, as the mayor mentioned, this is an introduction to the budget. So we will be offering the council other options for some different fund balance drawdown amounts. But for the purposes of the 77 cents, it draws down the fund balance still by $452,000.
And that's no ambulance or anything, right?
Correct, because the ambulance wouldn't be coming out of the general fund anyway. It will be coming out of the capital, but we are going to talk more about that. But yes, correct, Mayor. So 452,000 drawdown, that's 6% at fund balance as a percentage of expenditures. Okay, so let's move forward and first talk a little bit more about general fund revenues. So as you can see, they're projected to increase from 6.8 million to 7.3 million. One great thing that we did during the year was Melissa brought forward and got approved several permit and fees, new fees. She got new fees implemented, and so somewhat of a $40,000 increase you'll see that we're budgeting for permitting revenue for next year. And also new development that we anticipate to bring into Kennedale. So that's one of the increases in the revenue. Another area would be, what else did we increase? Charge for services increased slightly. You will see intergovernmental there. I know there's always a question, what is that? Why is that such a big part of the general fund? And intergovernmental is basically insurances and things like that, and also capital replacement transfers and things to that nature. There is a detailed list of what is within intergovernmental within your budget document, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have about that. But that's a look at our revenues. Okay, so we're looking at 7.3 million in revenues, and go to the next slide. And we're looking at 7.7 million in expenditures. And again, this does not include any significant type of bells and whistles or anything like that. It doesn't include any new compensation or anything like that. You will see a few of the departments fluctuate a little bit. Municipal court expenditure went down some just because of repositioning of one of the positions over there. We had a part-time person that we were that was in court, and we have reassigned that person to finance. So you will see finance budget go up just a little bit due to rearranging of that. That person, that position will still be assisting with court. We're just funding it out of finance next year. So you already see the drawdown, around $450,000 revenues under expenditures.
Lakita, can you kind of give an overview of what falls under community development?
Sure. So community development expenditures or revenues?
I guess really both. Just a quick answer.
Well, the main thing with the revenue is the fees that are collected. 1 second.
But Chris, that, if I could, Lakita, Chris, that the community development department essentially includes planning, building, official building inspections, code enforcement, and permitting are the primary functions of the community development department and economic development.
Okay. And I don't know if this is the right time to ask this question, but I know that we don't really know where things are going with facilities reopening. I'm assuming these budgets include the library and the senior citizen being operational. So if those are closed for a portion of the next year, that may be a small realized savings in expenses. Is that correct?
Well, not really, unless, I mean, we are still at full staff in the library, as an example. We've done no layoffs because we're still trying to provide all services virtually, and in the library, curbside service, and have taken on some other duties, even countywide, with helping in COVID-related matters with library staffing. But even though the building isn't open to the public, just like City Hall, conceivably you could see some reduction in janitorial or maintenance costs, but essentially the buildings still need to be maintained.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
No, thank you. I haven't got to deep dive all this. I couldn't remember everything that was under that tab.
Okay, no worries. All right, so that is a look at the general fund. So now let's go and talk about the water and sewer fund for next year.
Lakita, I'm sorry, let me, if we could back up again, and I think this just for emphasis, I guess, and to remind council and everybody that ideally what we'd like to do and where we'd like to go eventually is that $452,000 drawdown of the fund balance is zero, that we in fact are raising enough revenue in any given year to pay all of the expenses for that year. We want a balanced budget without having to draw down the fund balance. And that problem obviously has been exacerbated over the last couple of years. And it continues this year, even with the 4-cent tax rate increase that Lakita spoke about a minute ago. But our goal, our objective should be, as soon as possible over the next few years, to balance that budget without drawing down the fund balance. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Okay, the water and sewer fund, we kind of talked about this already. You know, we know we're looking at a pretty healthy fund balance right at the end of next year, working capital of 44.8%. But we do need to protect that and kind of not get too big-eyed about it, because we have some outstanding things that are coming up with the city of Arlington as it relates to water meter infrastructure installation, the water line connection, as well as some of the utility billing. So for next year, what we've done is, really at this point, we had anticipated already having billing transferred, but you know, we've run into some blocks in the road there. And so what we built in next year was to still be in our contract with the Muni Billing for the next few months. maybe through December, January, to give Arlington enough time to get ready to receive our billing. Because there are several moving pieces that go along with that. And so just with so many unknown costs that relate to those things, we want to make sure that we keep enough working capital to deal with those expenditures as they come along. So on this slide, I just wanted to kind of, you see that projected, let me move, I'm sorry, I can't see the screen over here. Here we go. Okay, so projected revenues, 4.5 million next year. No, I'm sorry, 4.4 million next year. And expenditures, 4.5. So I want you to kind of take a look at the expenditures and kind of what, see how this ties into what we were just talking about. So we budgeted for 1920. Something's happening, Leslie. I can't. There we go. Okay. We budgeted 4.3 million. And so again, we talked about some of those one-time expenditures that happened during the course of the year, departing with Fathom, having to contract with Muni Billing, some of the other contracts that came along with securing new billing services. That bumped us up to 4.6 million in expenditures. But as you can see, for next year, we're budgeting to go back down because after the December, January timeframe, we're hoping to part ways with Muni Billing and already be on board with Arlington and have a lot of those things under our belt. And so for next year, you'll see utility billing as well as operations costs and expenditures going down, just like we budgeted them to do. And we expect for that to have more in the next couple of years as well. The goal is to bring utility billing and operations, our expenditures in those areas all the way down because they would have transferred over to the city of Arlington. All right, so stormwater. So we know that just a little while ago, in June, we were able to get the stormwater fee increased by $1. That's going to add additional revenue to the stormwater fund for next year. There is a proposed budget drawdown of $238,777, okay? And you're looking at a negative number on the fund balance. And the reason that you're looking at that is because historically, our budget has shown available fund balance that should have been marked as unavailable because actually it's for debt. And so that was not available fund balance that was there for us to spend. And so during the course of the audit this year, we figured out what happened and what went wrong. So we had been historically reporting the wrong fund balances, but we have fixed that for this budget moving forward. Just wanted to bring that to council's attention. So moving forward, you will be seeing out on the stormwater summary page, you will be seeing a restricted fund balance and an unrestricted fund balance so that we're clear on what's operating versus what is for debt. Speaking of debt, the debt service fund, I just kind of listed all the bond issues and the different series of COs and tax notes that we've had over the years. Of course, there will be a detailed explanation of what each one of those bonds are for, what the funds can be used for, what part of it has been exhausted and what has not. I also included here just on looking forward, the potential series 2021 that we hope to bring to council probably in March. And that one is going to include 6 million. You know, we talked about the next 5 years being able to use an approximate 14 million towards capital project programming. And so hopefully, and I've been talking with bond counsel, hopefully we will able to, in December, come and talk to you more about that so that we can put those bond issues up for hopefully as early as March of next year. So the EDC fund continues to be healthy. We are increasing revenues 9.4% next year. And as a result, the EDC has decided to embark on a few additional expenditures. We brought the EDC budget to the board at our last meeting, and they approved, which they approved and approved for us to bring forward to council tonight. One of the expenditures that they added was for a town center study. So they want to embark on getting a town center study done. I think it's been talked about for a number of years. That's something that they want to do. So we budgeted, I believe, about $30,000 or $40,000 for that for next year. But still, at the end of the year, the EDC is healthy. Looks like we're ending with $887,000 in their fund balance. So they're being very responsible, and now they're looks like trying to embark on some projects that we haven't been able to do in the past. The TIF fund, you will find the TIF fund budget in your packet as well. Values increase, so consequently, we're adding a little bit more to our revenue for the TIF from the different entities that we receive revenue from. So we are looking at an increase in TIF revenues of 10.9%. All right, so back to new program requests. So this is your total that we're looking at. 351,000 of it is from the general fund, and then we have some capital needs as well. There's a detailed list that you'll be able to find within your budget book, but just kind of wanted to put the summary page out here. Again, none of these have been included. We just wanted to kind of remind council of what was being requested.
Keita, let me step in. There were a couple of things that when we talked about these new programs on last month that were included in the numbers and on the list that you saw then, they were relatively minor, but there were a couple of minor things in the police department for some renovations that we've determined should be paid for with some CARES money, and a couple of items there and in the senior center that we took off of this list because we're determined that we could pay for them from sources in the current fiscal year, and we're moving forward with those and have taken them off of this list if you tried to compare it to the one you got on July the 16th.
Yeah, and another one was the some of the expenses for the senior center, some of the replacement of the appliances. Because that expense was kind of minor, we decided to go ahead and include it and get it out of this year's budget as well. So in looking at the tax rate impacts, you know, we did have a different process that we had to go through this year with the implementation of Senate Bill 2. It was very involved, a very long, lengthy process as the comptroller's office and the appraisal district scrambled to include all the elements of Senate Bill 2 into the calculation. So with Senate Bill 2, there are instances where an automatic election could be triggered, and then there are also instances where a petitioned election could be triggered. And so here on this slide, I just kind of wanted to list some of the instances where a petition may be ensued. So, you know, you can review this at your leisure. I'm sure a lot of you have already looked at Senate Bill 2 and kind of what comes along with it. But essentially what it's saying is that if voters want to petition, if you are adopting a rate that is over the voter approval rate, then You know, if they got a list of 3% of registered voters to do a petition and it's filed within 90 days, they could move forward with that. If that petition is successful, the next election wouldn't actually take place in November because there is no time to meet a deadline by then. There's a deadline that would have already passed. So if any type of petition is successful, it would be on a May 2021 election. Also, what's different with Senate Bill 2 is that if the petition is successful and voters approve it, it will roll back to the voter approval rate, not the effective rate, okay? And the voter. Can you hear me?
Now we can.
Okay. So I don't know what part you didn't hear, but essentially, if there is a petition and that petition is successful, an election would have to be ordered, and it will be ordered for May. Okay. If that is successful, if the vote is successful in the petitioner's favor, then the tax rate will go back to the rollback rate. Okay, it's the old rollback rate, but it's the new voter approval rate, okay, which is the 77 cents. If that happened, let's just say if we adopted a tax rate that went over the voter approval rate, there was a petition with 3% of voters, it was successful. The election was successful in the petitioner's favor, then the rate would roll back to 77 cents. That essentially wouldn't change anything that we are proposing in this budget because we're already proposing the 77 cents. Okay, so keep that in mind as we move forward and talk more about the different options that we have with the tax rate.
And Lakita, if it's successful, then you return the money that's over that percentage, right, to the voters.
Yes, right. But George, you may want to explain because we will already have been so far into the year.
Yeah. What it means is that if in fact we adopted a rate that was over the 77 cents and the election was called but not held until next May, and the election was successful and the city had been collecting at that higher rate, the money that we had collected would then have to be refunded to the taxpayers who paid the difference between 77 cents and whatever you had adopted and collected. So, and in our case, if you adopted a tax rate of, let's say, 80 cents, because we're going to talk about that in a minute, that difference would be, we would hold on to that money. It would essentially be adopted for the purpose of increasing our fund balance to get us out of this tremendous hole that we're in. And so if the rate were rolled back, it would roll back to what we're proposing would fund what's in this budget. It would not fund any new programs. It would not fund the STEP programs in police and fire. It would not fund any compensation adjustments because they're not in there with the 77 cents anyway. So if that makes sense. So prior to this year, if there was a rollback election, the successful election would roll back the rate all the way to your effective rate. That's no longer the case. It would roll it back only to the voter approval rate, which is the 77 cents upon which this base budget is determined. That answer your question, Mayor? I must have really done that poorly. Lost everybody.
I guess that answered this question, huh? Okay. Go back one time, Leslie. Okay, so the only other thing is that, we also knew with Senate Bill 2 was the calculation of a de minimis rate because for smaller taxing units or cities who have a population of 30,000 or below, we were required to calculate a de minimis rate. Our de minimis rate in the calculation came out to be 88 cents. So we wouldn't have to worry about the requirement for the automatic election piece unless we decided to go with the rate that exceeded the de minimis rate. Next slide. All right, so just to give you a side-by-side of the total ad valorem tax rate as it stands now, 73 cents, with the debt rate of 1905 and the M&O of 5444. Going into next year, what's included with this current proposal is a total tax rate of 77 cents. We were able to keep our debt rate essentially the same, a few tenths of a digit off, but essentially still 19 cents on our debt rate, 58 cents on the M&O valuation, and then a total proposed tax rate of 77 cents. That is what supports the budget as it stands, as you have it in front of you. Now, one thing that is available, and we'll look at a couple of other scenarios as well, but in looking at the situation that we have with our fund balance, council is in a situation to be able to approve something above and beyond the 77 cents. So essentially, management's recommendation for saving fund balance is to consider 80 cents, which is essentially a 7-cent tax increase. The debt rate being 19 still, and the M&O valuation being at 60 cents. We will look in a second at what that will mean for the city's fund balance, the 77 cent versus the 80 cent. But again, if the council wants to consider the 80 cent, the additional fund balance that we're saving will not be for any new programs, any step increases or anything like that. It would just be essentially to help save fund balance, because with the situation we're looking at now, with what we're proposing, the 77 cent, that is still leaving us with a 6% fund balance, which is going to be unacceptable for rating agencies. Last November, we were approached by S&P to do something about our fund balance. And so we hurried and we tried to find ways to save money because that tax rate had already been adopted. There was nothing we could do about it at that point. But now that the year has turned, with the new calculation, the 77 cent came out to be our voter approval rate, which is a 4-cent increase. But again, not quite enough to improve fund balance enough.
Well, what Lakita is saying is even the 80 cents, that's very dramatic, and we understand that's a very dramatic increase from what the rate is today. But what we experienced 2 years ago was a very dramatic reduction that created, and you'll remember, those of you that were on the council, of the concern we had that the impact of that decision was going to be with us for a number of years. And at some point, the city is going to have to take some pretty dramatic action to correct that issue and correct that problem. A 6% in fund balance is not sufficient. The 80-cent tax rate would increase that, as Lakita is going to show you in a minute, from 6% to 9%, and that's still insufficient, but it's a move in the right direction. And I guess my concern is that at some point, somebody is going to have to take that kind of dramatic corrective action, or the city is going to continue to experience the budget shortfalls and the risk that we're facing financially with our fund balance as low as it is.
Lakita, you came on with fresh eyes. What's your view of how we got here?
Well, it was a very unusual situation. You know, we've kind of talked about it before. You know, it was very unusual. I've never seen anything done like that before. And I understand, you know, that it was from a prior council, but essentially to adopt a budget and then turn around and adopt a tax rate that does not support it, you're inviting this type of thing. And so that's what happened. We knew immediately after that 72 cent was adopted that we would have to immediately start taking action. And we would have also known that we were going to be reviewed and get a possible downgrade. And S&P is still not done with us. They are going to be back within the next 12 months, and they're going to want to see what drastic have we done to negate this other drastic thing that we did in the budget 2 years ago. And but yeah, it's just very unusual, and you know, it's something that is done, but at this point, we did something drastic 2 years ago. We have to do something drastic to move forward and to get ourselves out of the situation and start kind of making some of those decisions on our own, because if we don't, other things are going to have to happen. Programs are going to have to cease, or possible layoffs and things like that, especially in the wake of COVID, because with the economic state of the world right now, we don't know how much we can rely on sales tax revenue to balance us out in future years. And we also don't know what's going to happen with AV values. We see what happened this year. So, you know, the council, you know, really has some decisions to make, but, you know, the 77 cent putting us at 6% is really still not good enough. And I can tell you that if we adopt a budget with the 6% drawdown again, and when S&P comes back again, it won't be a good situation. There will be other more drastic measures that we'll probably have to take as a result of not being more aggressive with that tax rate when we had the chance to do it.
And so I'm not, you know, our position is now not to be looking at the past, moving forward. Everybody's got to put on their thinking hats and figure out, okay, now we need to get somewhere to get out of where we're at. It is what it is. That's what we should just focus on. And whatever we can do, use your brains. You got 5 smart council members here, plus Chris. And so we should be able to come up with some solutions, I think.
Next slide, Leslie. All right, so let's take a closer look at what adopting the voter approval rate would be. And so voter approval rate 0.774086, and we're proposing just below that 0.774085, okay? But what that would mean for the budget, again, instead of this year budgeting to draw down, or actually projected to draw down 657,000, next year we're still drawing it down 474,000, and that leaves us with the 6% fund balance. That's the situation that we will be looking at with the 77 cents. Next slide. So you compare that to what we will be looking at with the 80 cents, okay? It's a vast improvement. It's not the best situation. We're not trying to, you know, go all the way up to the de minimis rate of 88 cents, of course, or even anywhere between 80 and 88 cents. But if the council considers 80%, it will put us in a much better situation. And it will put us in a situation to possibly improve over the next few years instead of experience that sharp downfall that we were looking at with one of the earlier slides.
The important thing that Lakita is saying there is that the 80 cents, while it's a dramatic increase for the purpose of improving our fund balance, will be a new benchmark, a new beginning place as we're calculating the tax rate next year. and determining what's the rollback rate, what's the effective rate. And gradually over the next 2 or 3 years, we'd be able to get that fund balance back up into a respectable position that's never going to be done overnight. Okay.
So it is a, you know, it is you know, 7-cent increase, you know, but we have to think about doing something groundbreaking here to break that cycle that we're in, because if we don't break that cycle that we're in we don't have a lot of means to break that cycle. You know, we don't have a lot of extra income, or, you know, we have non-discretionary income that we probably can't touch. And the revenue that we have, it may not sustain our continued expenditures moving forward, you know, with COVID and everything else that's going on. So just keep in mind the state of the economy and everything else that's going on in the world, and also the opportunity that we have here with this calculation to do something groundbreaking, and that's going to set a new benchmark for us moving forward. All right, so what's next? So we have scheduled a series of additional meetings. I mean, we know with this information that we've given you this evening, the council will want some time to ponder on it, and you know, to have additional work sessions with staff. And so we've scheduled several meetings over the next couple of weeks to talk more about the budget, to you know, to tweak things and pretty much get council's input on everything. So we have work sessions scheduled on the 18th and the 25th. We have our very important public hearings on September 8th. With Senate Bill 2, there's no longer 2 public hearings on the tax rate. There's only 1 public hearing. We have that scheduled for September 8th. And then if everything goes according to plan, we will adopt the budget and the tax rate on September 15th.
And I would encourage all of you, because like I said, I think I'm always believing in the wisdom of crowds. Reach out to Nikita, set up a meeting with her. If you need to go over the budget and get some details, do it. So that way, when we come back to another meeting, and we can have more meetings, you've got your questions all lined up, and we have the answers ready to go. And like I said, I'm sure Nikita would be willing to do that through Zoom or one-on-one, but you guys have got a Herculean task ahead of you. And all the information you can get, the more the better.
Well,
Mayor, can we request that this presentation be sent to us so that we can have it to review after this meeting?
Absolutely. I think Leslie can you know, go into a Zoom form, and then you post it up on YouTube.
Oh, I thought that he meant just email out the PowerPoint, but yes, we will post the video on YouTube as well.
Yes, I would like to have a copy of the PowerPoint if that's possible.
I'll email that tonight.
Thank you.
And I'd be happy to do any Zoom meetings or anything. I think everybody, you know, everybody knows how to reach me. I'd be happy to jump on a Zoom call, a phone call. I've actually worked out several scenarios. George and I have looked at several different scenarios for a tax rate and what we could possibly propose to you. You know, something that would help us long term. And so if anybody wants to meet one-on-one or look at any different scenarios, definitely let me know, and I'd be happy to do that. And at this point, that kind of concludes my part of the presentation, and I'll turn it back over to George.
Well, Mayor, I think we've already had most of the discussion. I just wanted to be sure that this council was very much aware of the fact that we've got a long-term problem to correct here. And even doing what we're suggesting at 80 cents, if you would consider that, and you may not, I understand that. But even if you did that, in order to increase the fund balance to be at least half what it should be under our policy at 9%, we still have not, and you all need to be thinking that this budget does not include continuation of the STEP programs in public safety for compensation that we implemented 2 years ago and were able to make some improvements in this last year. It doesn't compensate other employees who we never managed to get to the 80% of market. But in this environment and in what's going on in the economy right now, and with a lot of folks who have lost their jobs, we have not recommended any increase or continuation of those programs, even in public safety, in this document. It does not include any of the other. The fire marshal, you all had expressed on July the 14th that you'd like to see a way to include the fire marshal's position and the associated equipment with that. None of that is in this as it stands, and the increase from 77 cents to 80 cents could be viewed as clearly an attempt to try to improve our bottom line in the fund balance this year and create a new beginning benchmark for next year's budget considerations.
If you consider and I think today all you do is set what the max might be. It doesn't set the rate. It says this is the max that you might go to, right? That's the resolution.
Well, the resolution that you need to consider tonight has now been drafted so that it says that you are considering
Right.
a rate above the what was the old effective rate or the rollback rate, the lower of those two. And clearly what we've recommended at 70 cents is the rollback rate. So all it does is say you're going to have a vote on that on September the 15th, but you're going to have a public hearing on it on September the 8th. That's what that resolution does.
But shouldn't the resolution, even if you wanted to think about 80, you'd have to say 80?
It doesn't state a rate.
It doesn't say a rate.
Okay.
It says that you're considering one above the no new taxes rate at this point. And you would be free to set it at any level you wanted to, but we may have to publish that you're going to consider a rate above that no new tax rate or the rollback rate.
And make no mistake about it. If you do 80, you're going to get a petition, and it will be a petition that takes maybe about 150 signatures, somewhere around there. That's not too hard to get in this day and age. And then there will be a vote on it. And then what you've done is you're telling voters, here's our options. What do you want to do, voters? It's up to you now. This is where we're at. And the council will live by whatever the voters make that decision to do.
This is, believe me, I understand this is not an easy decision. This is not a good situation for a city to be in. And I wish I was here giving you a better news story and I had a way to make it easy. But again, if we don't do that this year, if you can't see your way clear to take that dramatic action because of the dramatic action that was taken 2 years ago, then at some point, the council is going to have to do that. Or as Lakita said, we're going to be in a position of laying staff off, and this city has no bench strength in any of its departments. If we had to make dramatic reductions in the budget right now, rather than raise the tax rate in order to improve that financial condition and that fund balance, we're talking about laying off half to 3/4 of the general fund employees in each of the departments, and or doing things dramatic like closing the senior center or the library, because that's where our employees are. And 75% of our budget is personal services.
Well, I think what I would make sure to ask her, because you've just got the budget, do your, I hate to use this phrase, deep dive, because it's so hackneyed nowadays. Do your deep dive into the budget, you know, and if you have people that you know that are also experts, ask their opinion, but meet with Lakita. And if any one of you say, hey, I'd like to have another meeting with the entire council on the budget, let us know and we'll get a scheduled Zoom meeting. Or if you want to have the individual meetings with Lakita and go line by line with the budget, we'll do that too. But let's make sure that we know what we have to handle and what we have to do.
Mayor,
I wasn't sure if Linda was reaching for her microphone or not. It looked like she was.
Yes, I was going to ask if we could also have an additional slide, the one that you had labeled tax rate impact. If we could also have one that would show the impact if we kept it at the effective rate, which is the no new revenue rate now.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, you'll send that out, Lakita?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Linda, I'm in the impression right now where we're at, the more information for you, the better.
Thank you.
All right. Any other question for Lakita? Lakita, Levita's my secretary. So, well, she's quitting me actually. Not me actually. She's moved to another state, but not because of me either. Any other questions for Lakita? I saw that look. If you don't, we're going to move on to the next thing. But again, reach out to Lakita, reach out to George. If you have any questions of any particular department heads like Tommy or James or Amanda or Danielle or Melissa, reach out to them too. And Larry. Didn't mean to leave you out, Larry. And ask them those questions. We got time to do this. Get on the phone, get on Zoom, get as much information that you need to make a decision that you'll be comfortable with. And right now, Josh does not look comfortable with anything. It looks like he needs a margarita.
I've got a splitting headache. My palms are sweaty. I mean, this whole, I don't know, man. I mean, y'all keep saying this dramatic action. I think it's ludicrous that we're even thinking about going to 80 cents. I mean, it's just mind-boggling to me. And I don't know, we're in a tough position. I know that.
I know, Josh, and that's why they pay you $1 a month. So got a lot of research to do. And if you got ideas, you know, we're open to them.
But I mean, people have to realize too that you say this dramatic action. We had something very dramatic happen to us that nobody's ever experienced before, and that's COVID. So to me, raising taxes 4 cents on people, like you just said, who've lost their jobs. I mean, you know, could you imagine, seriously, could you imagine if we raised taxes to 80 cents right now? What this city would do? It'd be unbelievable.
Yes. Yeah, and of course, what happens if you don't, Josh? I mean, because this isn't, if you choose to stay at 73%, 73 cents we're at right now, we're doing a drawdown of close to $700,000. And that's with no new programs. So and I'm open to this, if you can find a way to say, okay, I found $743,000 to cut from the budget, so it's zero, because we have a fiduciary responsibility to the city, that's why I'm saying do that deep dive into it and show me where we can do it.
Well, I know that for what's budgeted in here now, I know we definitely need to take cuts on adding new personnel, because there's 3 or 4 spots in here that people are wanting new personnel. Unfortunately,
there are no new personnel added to this budget.
well,
There are no new programs.
we have the fire marshal, the assistant city manager,
That's
the
not in the budget. That's not in this budget. No new employees, no raises, no new programs are in the budget you're seeing right now. Is that correct, Lakita?
Yeah, that's correct. We didn't include any of the new programs, and no step increases, no compensation increases for staff.
or any of the building improvements.
On the police department, we have funded some improvements for screening walls and so forth that they had on their new program request out of the current year's budget or out of CARES money. So it's not, there's none of that included in the numbers for spending next fiscal year.
And George, where the oxygen, what are they called?
The self-contained breathing apparatus that you approved last year in the budget as a 3 or 4 year program at $40,000, I think, each year. That was approved last year. We implemented it. We did the first tranche of self-contained breathing apparatus this year, and it's built into the base budget. So the second year of that is in this budget. It wasn't a new program this year. It was a new program last year. But that second year of it is in this budget. But none of the new programs proposed this year because of growth or whatever are in there.
So again, no hiring, no raises, no new programs in this budget.
That's correct.
And if we stay at 73 with all of those things, we draw down the fund balance almost $700,000.
Yeah, we've got a slide that we could put up here if you want to go into that tonight. That what Linda asked for is what would it be at 70 at the effective rate. We could put that up here, but it'd show you what it would be at the current rate, at the new effective rate, and at this rate, and some other at 80 cents, and all the way up to the de minimis rate. What would the impact be on the fund balance? We can send that out to you, or we can put it up here on the screen and talk about it tonight. But the answer to your question, Mayor, is I looked through every department's detailed budget identification of line items and just tried to make a pretty quick cursory review of what is it in each department's budget that we could consider to be discretionary money. There are things that are non-discretionary. We have to pay our insurance premiums through the TML program. We have to pay contracts. We have to pay some employees. And if I assumed that police and fire budgets were off the table as far as cuts are concerned, then there's very little room to make cuts to make up the drawdown that we're doing at $452,000. We've got about less than $1 million in discretionary money to draw down $500,000 to $700,000. And that would mean I could immediately identify in each of the departments probably a total of 11 employees that the only way we could get that kind of money is to lay those people off. It's the only way.
Can you show us the drawdown screen, George?
I can show you Leslie, can you put up, do we have that slide that shows each of those different scenarios? And then I'll tell you where to go on it.
While she's looking that up, I did want to make another comment, kind of piggybacking off of Councilmember Alton. As y'all will all recall, a few years back, the city was in a bind with the water sewer rates. And the council, in its infinite wisdom at that time, did what they thought was best, and they raised the rates drastically instead of doing it gradually to help the taxpayer. And I just don't want to see us to do that again with the taxes and jump it way up all at one whack, just trying to help our fund balance, because these people out there, some of them have lost their jobs too. Just
Right.
Things to think about,
That's a good point, Linda. It is a good point. And the council did what they thought was best to recover that balance, and they paid a political price for it. That's true. But, here we go.
Okay, if you would look at that first column that's got a yellow heading at the top, that's the budget that Makita just finished going over with you at 77 cents as the tax rate. And if she scrolled all the way down to the bottom of that screen, it would show the 6% fund balance at the end, 6.3%. So we would have gone, if you look at the column to your far left, we would have improved this year up to 12.5% because we did some non-hiring and told S&P we were going to try to improve. We got it up where we're going to end this year at 12.5%, but we're now going back down to 6.3%. That column between those two is the 2.3. And Linda, I think that's the column, scroll back up, Leslie, I think that's the column that if we went to the current tax rate, left the tax rate at 73.4 cents, we would have a barely over 2% ending balance. Now, if you move over to the right,
George, can she shrink that screen down just a little bit so we can see it a little bit? Yeah, so you can see a little bit better there.
Okay. Now, if you look at the column that's titled the blue one between the two yellow ones, that's the 75-cent effective tax rate calculation this year. That if you went to the effective tax rate or the no new revenue rate, the ending balance would be 4.5%, and the drawdown would go from 472. Makita, help me out. Where am I?
It would be 591,000.
591 or 592. So that drawdown would increase at the effective rate. If you scroll over one more column to the right that shows the rate at 80 cents, that's the one that we talked about earlier that would get the fund balance up to 9%. And then if you went, just to skip some of that, if you went all the way over to the right, the last column is the de minimis rate. That's the rate where we could raise the maximum that we could up to $500,000 in new revenue at 88 cents. That would get us a fund balance back up to 17%. Now, that's not going to happen. We all know that. And I'm not even going to suggest that you think about that, but it's to give you a picture that it's going to take us some time to dig out of this hole that we're in. And that's the reason the 80 cents, as hard as that is to think about, might be a point of beginning to do something to counteract what happened 2 years ago. The effective rate at 75 cents, the column between the two yellow ones, is the effective tax rate now. And if we went to that, we would have a larger drawdown and a smaller fund balance. But Linda, that's the question you were asking earlier if we could send to you. So we'll send you this whole chart and you can study it more closely. But again, none of these scenarios has all of this the only change it's made from one column to the next is in the ending balance, trying to get that ending balance up. And clearly you could balance that and increase the ending balance some and add in a new program if you wanted to and just felt strongly about it. But there's no new ambulance here. There's no new fire marshal here in any of these scenarios as they stand.
So if we keep the rate we have right now, we'll have drawn down $1.4 million out of our reserves in 2 years.
Yes.
And in the first year, you'd be down to 2% of fund balance. 2.3%.
And this would be easier in a city if we had some latitude and we had 4 people doing code enforcement and could reduce the workforce. But if we reduce our code enforcement department, we have no code enforcement. I mean, we're just at that bare bones level right now that's almost unfathomable in a city this size.
There is one alternative. A city that I used to work for, we had to unfortunately do this one time, but it affected all employees and they did get to maintain their jobs, and that was to mandate furlough days. Nobody likes that, but it is an option.
Yeah, it's an option. So again, like I said, if you want to keep the present rate, if you can find a way to save $763,000 to bring us to a zero fund balance or even close to that, I'm open to it. So that's why everybody has to do this deep dive into the budget.
We would be happy to sit down and look at line item by line item, what's in this
Let me ask
budget, if you want to do that. With any one of you, any individual member.
Got a question, George.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So what you're saying is if we keep the tax rate the way it is now, then you would have to lay people off.
No, there's no way, I'm not, absolutely. And probably 10 or 11 people, or close it. Probably that would mean closing the library and the senior center, because there's just no place to get that many people. And that's where our money is in salaries and compensation.
And the library and the senior centers get you about 350,000, leaving you about 400,000 short.
Oh, I mean, there is no way, Josh, that I know of that we could stay at the current tax rate and not lay off rather large numbers of people, up to 10 or 11 people. And we've only got a workforce of 60 or something in the first place. And that doesn't really, I mean, that's we might be able to get some relief with the laying street department employees off, but those are not really funded directly out of the general fund. They're paid for with tax dollars in that we transfer money over to the street fund and are paying salaries out of it. So, but.
I have a question. How much money have we lost from trying to close down the salvage yards in tax dollars?
I can't answer that question, Sandra. I mean, at this point, all we've done is give some notices and we haven't really incurred a lot of legal expense at this point.
But I mean, like, for instance, Gary Mitchell's business, I know he's tried to sell it to a couple of people. So I'm assuming he's not doing a lot of business out of it. So how much money do you think we've lost just from salvage yards? And also, I remember, now I don't know, when they was talking about Link Street and that it was an EDC project, but the city paid for some of that. Since the EDC is doing so well, can we get the EDC to pay us some of that money back or no?
I'd have to look into that. I can't remember, Sandra, off the top of my head, what the city may have paid for as part of Link Street, but there may have been some portion there. That's possible. I don't remember.
I think someone said it was like 300,000. I don't know either, but I was just thinking that maybe we can get some of that money back since the EDC is doing so well.
Yeah, these are the kind of brainstorming that we need. Hey, Chief Brown, when we talk about A&A, was that mainly because we just had so many code violations that we had to clean up? Violations of the law that you were going in there?
We went in and did an inspection in there, and this was about a year and a half back. You know, as far as us working with him, we worked with him to try and get him closer to where the code itself was. So there was no fines from the fire side. We had worked with him to try and get him compliant with what the fire codes needed to be.
There were two issues there, Brian. One was the code violations in the facility itself. The other was zoning violation.
Well, like I said, we're not going to solve this tonight because you just got your budget, but go in there and dive in, you know, come back with ideas. I mean, I think we're all open to ideas. That's
So
what
are they still not up to code?
Sorry?
Are they still not up to code?
A&A?
Yeah.
I think
A&A needs some more work. That's for sure.
I've got two random questions, real quick, while we're still here. In the city manager's message in the front of the book, it talks about the EDC and the tiers. So I went back and I looked inside the budget, and I see that in 2017, the tiers had 94,987, and then the roadway impact fee had 83,000. But now both of those have 10,000 in them. Do you happen to know why those decreased so much from then? Anybody?
I don't, but we'll make note, Josh, of your question. We need to,
And do you know what the balance is of the tiers right now?
Yeah, the projected fund balance of the TERS is, the TERS is in a deep hole because of spending money on, and Larry, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was New Hope Road. We were spending money out of the TERS long before we started collecting enough to cover it. And so as of the end of last year, the TERS was in the hole. With fund balance by $540,000. So we're trying to climb out of it. So now that values are increasing, we're actually getting some real revenue into the TERS. By next year, we expect to be close to getting out of the hole. So next year, we're looking at a negative $231,000 at the end of the year.
Okay.
So there is no more spending out of the TERS or anything. And right now we're just trying to recover and recoup the revenue to get that to a positive fund balance.
I was just curious because there was no balance on there, but it said 10,000 on both of those two items. So I was just kind of curious. I got one last question. This is just random, but it's for Larry. One of the capital project funds was for Beacon Hill. What's going on with Beacon Hill?
Beacon Hill is a drainage project that extends drainage under Mansfield Cardinal through the Encore property and through Tarrant County Precinct property to make sure that that drainage works appropriately so those ponds won't be overwhelmed with poor drainage downstream of those ponds of Beacon Hill.
Okay. That's all I got. Sorry, guys.
No worries. So like I said, this is just an overview. This is, throw out, put on your thinking hats, think of every idea you can come up with. Nothing's too crazy right now. So work it out and meet with staff. Okay, George.
we will add, on your agendas, your regular agendas will be including in the work session a discussion of budget so we can continue any discussions that you want to have. Obviously, it helps answer the questions that you might have as you do your deep dive to ask us the questions in advance of meetings so we can be sure we have the answers. But we'll be posting work session items to talk about budget.
Like I said, if you feel like you want to have another group budget meeting, just let us know and we'll get one going. But you also do the individual ones so you can get the answers that you need. Well, that's an opening salvo on the budget. So I believe what's our next item up for discussion, Leslie?
The next item is the resolution to amend the order of election to include the expanded early voting dates.
Well, we've got the resolution on setting the tax to approve putting an item on the agenda for September 15 to vote on the budget, on the tax rate, and also to set a public hearing on it on September the 8th. That's the first resolution.
All right, so do I have a motion to make that resolution to get those dates down? Whoa, slow down. I can't get all these at once. Anybody? It's just a date. Man, I have a hard time getting dates.
Is it 574? Leslie, what's the resolution number?
It's
574.
I'll make a motion that we approve resolution 574.
Second.
All right, so Leslie, will you give us a roll call?
Josh Altum,
Yay.
Chris Pugh,
Yay.
Mayor Pro Tem Lee,
Sandra, you're muted.
Yay.
Linda Rhodes,
Yay.
and Chad Wandell.
Yay.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right, next item, since I don't have my agenda up with me.
Okay, that's actually the one to expand the early voting dates into the order of election. So it is resolution 575, and it doesn't change anything else other than the new expanded early voting that the governor approved.
All right, so need a motion to approve that. I don't think anybody's going to be objecting to expanding early voting.
I'd like to
I'll
make
make
a
it.
motion to approve resolution number 575.
Woo, there's one. Have a second.
I'll second.
All right, you want to take the roll there, Leslie?
Josh Altum,
Yay.
Chris Pugh,
Yay.
Mayor Pro Tem Lee,
Yay.
Linda Rhodes,
Yay.
and Chad Wandell.
Yay.
Mayor, the motion passes unanimously.
And do we have anything else on the agenda? Then I
No.
need a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Sandra. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Linda.
Yes, sir.
And now I just need you to take a roll call, Leslie. And don't forget, we want to send out these PowerPoints tonight and those budget numbers tonight too.
Thank you.
Sorry, Josh Altum,
Yeah.
Chris Pugh,
Yay.
Mayor Pro Tem Lee,
Yay.
Linda Rhodes,
Yay.
and Chad Wandell.
Yeah.
Passes unanimously.
Was that everybody?
Have a great evening.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you all.